All right, here we are again. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. Welcome to you if this is your first time here. To everyone else, thanks for returning. Most of you probably know there's been considerable controversy around the show over the last few weeks. I sure made a mess of things. And I have been working to do whatever I can to sort through it. Today's episode is part of that. I don't want to say too much about it. I want you to just listen to it. I will say that I have never been more nervous to record a conversation for this show than this one. And that includes at the very beginning when I was nervous all the time. I just had no idea what to expect going into this. You see, my guest today is Jessie Nieusma. And Jessie listened to the episode and emailed me to take me up on the invitation to come on the show. So I immediately sent him a link to schedule, and he did. And that was it. We had no other interaction. What you are going to hear is the only actual interaction we've ever had other than the 2 emails. And that is the usual protocol for the show. That's usually the way I like it. But in this instance, I just had no idea what to expect. And I am so profoundly grateful to Jessie for the kindness that he showed me. And I consider this just a start. Also, Jessie provided me a whole bunch of links to resources, so I have included them in the description for the episode. So he mentioned some things and you can find links to them in the description. He also sent me links to a whole bunch of other stuff that he didn't mention. It's all there. So, as unusual as it may be for me to be this brief, I think I'm just going to leave it there. I just think that the matter at hand is so pressing that any small talk seems out of place. I will touch base with you on the other side, but we're going to just get to it. Let's go ahead and listen to this conversation that I had with Jessie Nieusma. Hello?
Hello.
Hello, is this Jessie?
This is Jessie. Hey, Jay, how's it going?
It's going okay.
Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you okay. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, we're good.
All right, well, I am already recording, okay? I don't want there to be any surprises.
Yep, no worries. I kind of figured that, so.
Okay. Well, first, just thank you so much. I really appreciate you giving me your time, and I'm just grateful that you're willing to talk to me.
Yeah, definitely. I am really active in doing this kind of work and educating people because I feel like there's a lot of misunderstandings, and it's really actually harmful to a lot of people when those misunderstandings kind of get perpetuated over and over. So I have been involved and active in this community and advocacy for about 20 years. So I feel like I have a lot of knowledge to share. So,
well, again, just thanks. And I'm really appreciative that, again, you're here. I have to say that the circumstances that bring us together are so fraught and unprecedented for me. All of my usual things that I do with this show feel inappropriate. Mm-hmm. And, one of the hardest parts whenever I'm having a call with someone like this is just trying to find a place to start. And
Yeah.
I'm just so completely at a loss as to where to start. I'm wondering if you have any ideas about where you think we should start.
Well, first I can start by introducing myself a little bit, maybe.
That sounds good.
Great.
Thanks.
So my name is Jessie Nieusma. My pronouns are he, him, his. I've been practicing yoga for about 4 years. I'm in the process right now of completing a 200-hour teacher training. I've done all my apprentice training and stuff, and I'm just kind of, apprentice teaching rather, and I'm just kind of finishing up some loose ends with that. As I said before, I've been a member of the LGBTQIA plus community for about 20 years, kind of claiming various labels throughout that time. So first I came out as bisexual in my late teens, and then I came out as a lesbian at 21, and then as genderqueer at around 26, and then finally as transmasculine at 28. So I've been out as trans for about 7 years. So mainly the reason that I really felt it important to do this interview with you is, again, like I said, there's a lot of misinformation, and I feel like it kind of can get hung up in assumptions, and people don't talk to actual people who are of the community to find out the real answers to things. So I just really want to, number one, clear up a few things that were mentioned in the previous podcast. And then I want to actually move on from that and not even talk about that stuff anymore, because I feel like I don't want to give any more of that information a platform. So then I want to maybe move on and, have a conversation, and you can ask questions, that kind of thing. So if that's cool with you. I know it's your podcast, so I'm not trying to.
I'm feeling so grateful to you right now. I think that sounds exactly right. One thing I have learned is that there's certain, they're not even topics. I don't know what they are. They're like these areas of contention. And it doesn't always seem very useful to me, because it seems like people agree on a lot of stuff, but then there's these things that send people in these opposite directions. So I do think there was misinformation. I think it's important for us to clear it up. So why don't we start there, as you said?
Yeah. So one of the first things that I want to clear up is specifically regarding trans youth, trans children, trans youth, is that it was mentioned that there's, hormone blockers and hormone replacement therapy and surgeries happening on young kids. And that's just not the case. There's very strict guidelines. There's a website that you can check out called WPATH, WPATH.org. And that is the basically worldwide standards for treating trans people. And you can find all the qualifications, on that website. And puberty blockers are essential healthcare for trans kids, because it's giving them time to figure out if, number one, they want to continue on with their own natal puberty, or if they want to go on hormone replacement therapy. So the blockers are really, really important to giving these kids the time that they need to figure this stuff out. It's not going to cause drastic changes to their bodies. In fact, it's halting the changes that would happen with a natal puberty. A lot of the changes that happen at puberty, right, are irreversible. So without surgery or, alternatives like that. So the extra time can be vital to these kids. And not to mention, right, the emotions and stuff that come up with puberty anyways. And if you're going through what might be the wrong puberty for you, it can be even worse.
Yeah, no, I think that is such a important point of clarification, because I did learn that I think that the characterization was was horribly wrong and inaccurate to say that it's just like this willy-nilly thing. It's certainly, there's like a rigorous process, and it doesn't seem like people go into it lightly, you know?
No, certainly. I mean, a lot of times these kids, you know, not always, because every trans narrative is different. So like I came out as an adult. I figured myself out as an adult, but some kids know when they're, you know, 3 years old. So one of the I guess guides kind of that some psychologists use is if the child is consistent, insistent, and persistent about their gender identity. So if they are consistently saying, I'm not a girl, I'm a boy. If they are insistent all the time, I'm not a girl, I'm a boy. And if they are persistent about it. And I think that it's a 6-month period of this kind of qualification is when a psychologist might give a gender dysphoria diagnosis.
I guess also with I've been having so many conversations around this, and this is sort of the one area where people have the greatest concern around children. And
yeah. And you know what? I do too. That's why I'm doing this, honestly, because I have concern for trans kids that there's so many misconceptions that they're not getting the healthcare that they absolutely need. So
yeah, let me actually say something about that, because I haven't spent a lot of time just like stating my position, and I want to say very clearly, like, I am not in favor of any restriction on anyone's access to care or anyone's equal protections under the law. I would never vote against anyone having their rights. And so that said, I think where it gets more confusing is I have a daughter, and if my 11-year-old daughter came to me out as trans, I would absolutely support her. I would let her express herself however she wants and be however she wants, whether that's clothing, hair, or whatever. But I would definitely have like trepidation about medical intervention up until a certain age. I don't know what that age is. I don't know if there's like a too young to transition age. And I would never impose that feeling or belief in me on anyone else. Like, I think it doesn't affect me what other people decide to do with their children, you know? So I wouldn't impose my feelings on others, but I think I do have an uncomfortable feeling around the idea of interfering with somebody's, like, as you said, development or puberty development. I feel like once someone comes of age, then that person has an inalienable right to be self-determined. But I guess I have this uncomfortability around the idea that a 3-year-old would know enough to know. I don't know. And that's where I think my confusion, others' confusions might be.
Yeah. So I guess it has to be on a case-by-case basis, right? So what works for one kid is not going to work for another. So some kids, they absolutely need this care, and it would be detrimental to their mental or emotional health to not receive it. It really has to be case by case. If your daughter came to you and said she was trans, for instance, you would have to probably look at what's happening in her life besides just that declaration, right? Is she depressed? Is she anxious? Is she having other issues? And would this treatment potentially mitigate some of those? So it's entirely case by case. But another clarification that I'd like to make is that absolutely nobody is advocating for genital reconstructive surgeries on children. That is not a thing. So
that's so important. It's so important to hear that said, because that is the scare tactic.
Yes, absolutely.
I fell victim to that scare tactic. Absolutely.
And that's why I'm here, because people just don't know. Like, why would you know that if you're not either involved in the community or have a child who is in the community? These aren't things that you're necessarily going to go and research on your own. because you don't necessarily have a reason to. So,
well, and also I want to say that researching on YouTube is really not the right place.
oh my goodness. So I wanted to bring this up because I often say that a YouTube video literally helped me to figure out that I was trans. And I went on YouTube. I haven't needed it as a personal resource for some time now, but the first few years of my transition, coming out in my transition, it was absolutely vital to me, because I was able to access people who were going through it at the time, and I could see what was happening to them, what they had to do to get their hormones, to get their surgery, etc. And so it was absolutely vital to me. But recently, I actually went back on YouTube and I just did some searches to see what would come up. And it was horrible. Like, I don't know what's happening on YouTube, but all these detransition videos and these, I regret transitioning and you will too. Like, I don't understand why this stuff is coming up, because this is not this is not the accurate information. Like, there are absolutely people who detransition and they are absolutely valid. But I feel like what's not talked about is the reasons that those people detransition, which often are stigma and rejection from family and friends and other issues surrounding that. Not necessarily that they're not trans anymore, because that's not a thing, right? People detransition oftentimes because of the consequences that have come from the transition via social acceptance. So,
yeah, I agree. That I definitely, I mean, I had the wherewithal not to just go off of YouTube videos, but there's definitely videos on there that are, I don't know, misleading, I think, to say the least.
yeah, absolutely.
And I guess that, the reasons why, like, I've been just listening and trying to take in all the responses, and I feel like what I see is that some of the reasons why there are those videos, I think, is that there is this sort of hang up around this one thing, around gender and sex. And it seems like some people feel very threatened and want to, like, say they want to reclaim women's spaces. And some women, I think, are saying that they want to protect children, as we said, which we just addressed. I think I think everyone I've talked to agrees that, like, gender is a fluid thing, that, like, the social constructs around girls, pink princesses, and blue boys, blue baseball bats or whatever is bullshit. And people should be able to express themselves in any way they want. And it's fluid and mutable. But then there's this, like, question around biological sex or something. And when someone wants to distinguish between trans women and women, which I really understand has become this, like, lightning rod, horrible. It's just mean to say, it seems to me. But it seems to me rooted in a confusion around this.
I really feel like is distinguishing between biological women and trans women, isn't that just reducing women to their body parts, right? So you have to have a vagina and a uterus to be a woman. Is that true? Because there are also trans men who have a vagina and a uterus, but they're men. So I just feel like reducing this down to, if you don't have a vagina and a uterus, then you're not a woman. Well, what about somebody who had a hysterectomy? Does that mean she's not a woman anymore?
I see your point is well taken, especially when someone has a hysterectomy, that doesn't make them not a woman anymore. So why wouldn't it be true the other way? I guess when you first said it, what came to mind is that when you say that it's about, if it's a gender expression of womanhood, that's different than, like a reproductive sex binary or something. And I hesitate to even say it because this is the thing that I think is like the flashpoint where it gets us all off track and in not helpful directions where we are right now. But right. It is sort of the thing that everybody brings up to me, that it seems like this idea that there's a relatively new idea in evolution. Maybe I'm wrong about that, in terms of that someone like a man identifying as a woman is biologically a woman. And I've heard some trans people say that's no one's saying that. And you saying that is just like is just rooted in hate, essentially. And then I've heard people saying, no, that's actually true, that the biological sex is on a spectrum just as much as the gender is.
Well, so it essentially it is, because there are intersex people. The mere existence of intersex people proves that sex is not binary. So there are women who identify as women. You would look at them and you would assume that they were a woman, and they have XY chromosomes. So, but they were assigned female at birth based on their external genitalia, and the only reason that they maybe knew this is because of a chromosome test later in life. There are over 17 different intersex conditions, and intersex people are as common as redheads. So sex is absolutely a spectrum. And to just say XX means female, means girl, means woman, and XY means male, means boy, means man, I think is really inaccurate, because there's so much variety in between that, just like gender.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely variety in between gender, and I think your points are very well taken. I know that it seems to me that this is really the contention right here, because when I've heard people talk about intersex as the example, I think even Kachi talked about that this is rare, and that even within that, there's always a male-female way of determining it or whatever. I don't know enough to really speak to it. I've read like the Scientific American article, and then there's the other one that refutes it. It seems like there's some debate in the scientific community about it as well. I don't know.
I mean, yes, there's debate about almost everything in the scientific community.
Yes, yes, that's true.
But I mean, I don't see how the presence of intersex people would disprove sex is a spectrum. That just doesn't make sense to me. But
yeah. Well, again, I don't always know that it's so helpful always to dwell on this point, which people really do, because right. I don't always know how much it really affects the things that matter. Like, I guess it matters to certain groups in terms of exclusion. If someone wants to have a woman's only space and they don't believe that someone who wasn't born with female genitalia is a woman, then they don't want that person to be there. And I understand that's a very old contention within that LGBTQ community.
Yeah, but
it goes way back.
A lot of times what happens with this kind of argument is that trans men end up being excluded because just like the bathroom issue with, if you're a man, you better not go in the bathroom behind my wife or daughter. But they're saying basically if you have a penis, you better not. But then what about the trans man, somebody like myself, who you look at me and I have a full beard and I have muscles and I look like a man. Like, would you want me to go into the bathroom with your wife or daughter? Absolutely not. So
yeah, that's true.
I feel like you can't have it both ways, right? So,
because but then that does just go to the idea of you're fitting more to the ideas that people have about gender, so they feel less uncomfortable. But it doesn't take away from the point you just made about sex parts.
Well, That yeah, and that doesn't even end up including non-binary people, right? Who are people that either identify as both or neither, or maybe gender fluid, so they kind of go back and forth. You know, there are infinite presentations of people, and why can't they just use the bathroom that they are most comfortable in?
Yeah, I agree with that. Again, I don't know. I don't know what it's like to
So
be a
one point I'd like to make about while we're on the bathroom issue is that a lot of times people are saying they want to protect their, their children or whatever. There are more United States government officials who have been convicted of assaulting people in bathrooms than trans women. So it is not a thing that trans women are just going into bathrooms and assaulting people. It's just not a thing. In fact, trans people are far more likely to be assaulted for using a bathroom that somebody else decides that they shouldn't be in. So the real danger is not to your daughter, it's to the trans people.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the bathroom issue and like the school sports issue, like those just seem to be like people are using those for political reasons, like, and I do think that's rooted in like oppression against trans people.
Absolutely. And since you've brought up the sports issue, it's similar to the bathroom issue. There was such backlash with the bathroom issue that they moved on from it, and now they've decided to target trans youth in sports. There are, last I checked, almost 24 states right now that have anti-trans legislation in their state legislators. And they literally just moved on from the bathroom issue when they couldn't win there. They just found a different issue to try to target trans people. And a lot of these people that have introduced these policies, they can't even name one trans person in their state who is an athlete that they're feeling like they need to discriminate. So they're making an issue where none exists.
Yeah, I think that's really is the issue where it definitely happened in the podcast where trans people are made out to be this like threat or something.
Right.
I really think that came from Kachi. Like she feels threatened, but I don't know that trans people are as much of a threat as she seems to be making it out to be.
They're not. If they were, I mean, trans people have been playing sports for a long time. There are probably thousands of trans athletes. And if it was the case that they were going to transition and then dominate in their sports, then you'd be hearing about this all over the place. And that's just not a thing either. Like it's not, it doesn't happen.
There's always like these instances that people point to, but I'm so skeptical of that because we just live in this culture where people like, I don't know, it's not rude. That's not like real data because you can point to one anecdotal case of something or whatever.
Exactly. And doesn't it make sense that maybe that person had an advantage because they trained their ass off, right? Like, why does it have to be because they're trans?
Yeah.
There's a person that I want to mention here. Her name is Dr. Rachel Mckinnon, and she is a professional cyclist. She's a trans woman, and she's also, I think she's a professor of philosophy, amongst other things. She does a lot of research. She has a really good presentation on this topic. And one thing that she also talks about is how in sports we discriminate for physical characteristics all the time, right? So in basketball, we discriminate for tall people. In gymnastics, we discriminate for short people. And the data suggests, and you should check out her talk definitely because it's amazing. And she can definitely articulate this better than I can. But what she says is that there is more of an advantage for the tall basketball player or the short gymnast than there would be an advantage for someone with higher testosterone versus someone with lower testosterone.
Mm-hmm.
So the data does not support this.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't been able to see evidence that there's really this problem of men claiming to be women and then winning all the trophies.
Because it's not a thing. It's just not. It's not a thing.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it. Okay, well, I guess then we had talked about, I mean, first of all, is there other areas that you can think of that we need to clear up in terms of misinformation?
Hmm.
I mean, I have like a couple of questions that I'm still wrestling with for myself. And then I know you talked about like, where do we go from here? And I'm very interested in that too.
Yeah. I guess I don't really necessarily have anything specific that I can remember that I wanted to address, but maybe your questions might kind of prompt me. So,
okay. I mean, I guess the biggest question I have right now is like, I feel like I didn't know what I was getting into, and I don't really want to like go into the reasons why, because I don't want to make excuses for it. But then when it happened, when I did it, there was really this conversation around whether it should be allowed to have happened. Like when I heard her talk, I didn't hear it as hate speech, and so many other people did. I'm sort of trying to understand why, I guess.
Well, let me think how to answer this one. So a lot of the things that she said were basically talking points. She mentioned TERF, trans exclusionary radical feminist, and a lot of the things that she said were literally just out of the playbook, using fear tactics and misinformation and bad science to come to a conclusion that is just inaccurate, and it directly harms people. The things that were being said lead to discrimination and violence against trans people. So I feel like the information is out there for her to get that's accurate, and the stuff that she's consuming is biased and just not true. So I don't know necessarily that I would label it hate speech myself, but it is absolutely harmful.
Yeah. I mean, I guess my confusion around it is also that I understand some about intersectionality. So when you say it's directly harmful, I believe that that's how it would be harmful, because it plays into the stereotypes and the ideas around it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to give you some statistics here. There was a GLSEN survey of LGBTQ, and so this is not only trans people, but this includes LGBT people, lesbian, gay, bisexual, etc. This was particularly students, and more than half of LGBTQ students feel unsafe at school. More than half hear negative remarks from peers and staff, and less than a quarter see positive representations of queer people in any of their classrooms. So these kids don't feel welcome at school, right? And that directly leads to depression, anxiety, all these mental health disorders, etc.
I mean, those are important statistics to cite. And I think that, you know, when I heard her talk, I did feel like she was angry, and I did think that she made it seem that there was a threat, because there was to her. But I also know that there's a lot of people who have reached out to me since, and they have like the same concerns, and even women who actually do feel threatened in the way that she feels threatened. And I guess when there was sort of a campaign to remove it, I think like I might have gotten to a place where I would have done it. But then when there was this huge thing, then it became no longer about me learning and sharing in that process. It became about like demands and me capitulating to the demands. And then it falls into this, this polarizing thing where, some people, if I delete it, then it's either I'm capitulating or it's censorship.
But I guess what I would say is these claims that are rooted in bad science and misinformation, is that something that you want on your platform, right? Like, do you want to put out information that is inaccurate? Because that's what's happening. She's using.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.